Hey y'all, and welcome back to my channel. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make this St. Patrick's Snowglobe Peekaboo tumbler. Normally, I would show you all of the PDB glitters from the pack that we are using in the tutorial, but this is pretty lengthy, so we're going to jump right in. I'm using a 24-ounce double wall plastic tumbler from Bare Tumblers. As you can see, the bottom is already pre-drilled. It looks very nice and clean. It is a small hole, but all of my glitters will fit through this, and it does come with a stopper, so you can easily seal in the solution in between the double walls. We are going to use Golden Rule from PDB Creative Studio, and to keep my glitter from falling off the side or sticking to my tape, I just took a large piece, I believe this may be a 3-inch piece of painter's tape, folded it over, left a little bit of that stickiness exposed, and then wrapped it around the tumbler. Tapping the side or using some sort of point to press the glitter down into the opening would have taken quite a bit of time. I've saw a lot of people use these massage guns to get that glitter down in there, and I know I laugh every time I see it, but it works. You can see that the glitter just kind of funnels down into the center of this tumbler, and it took a whole maybe 2 minutes. I didn't really measure the amount of glitter that I put into this tumbler. I didn't want an excessive amount because we are going to add in some 24 karat mica to our center solution. So that will help fill in the areas that the glitter does not and create a really nice flow. I got this condiment bottle from the dollar store. It just has a point at the top that I can easily trim off to the size that I need to put the solution in the center of the tumbler. I dropped some of that 24 karat mica from PDB Creative Studio down into my bottle and used a 3-to-1 ratio of my vegetable glycerin and distilled water. You want to use distilled water so that it does not mold over time. And I got the medium-sized bottle of vegetable glycerin from Amazon. You want to trim the top of your bottle to where there's a tiny little spot for air to come out of the center of your tumbler as you are putting the solution in. And after you have a little bit in your tumbler, clean that top off, remove your tape, and then shake the tumbler around a little bit. You can even use that muscle tool once again to help combine the liquid with your glitter in the center and prevent your glitter from getting clumped up at the top. Now, I know a lot of people have trouble with getting that bubble, that last little bit of center filled with your solution. If you hold your finger over the opening of the tumbler, tilt it to where that bubble goes up, and then as soon as you flip it, remove your finger off of the opening, and it will sort of create like a suction effect, I guess you can say. So it will open that up just a little bit so you can put more solution in there and prevent having that large bubble floating around in the center. You can also tap your tumbler down on your surface, and that can also open that up so you can fill with more solution. And I have also seen people use a syringe with sort of a needle point, something like you would use to apply glue for a rhinestone tumbler. So if for whatever reason you cannot get that spot, you can stick that needle point syringe down into the top of the tumbler and kind of pinpoint it that way. You can see there is a little bit larger bubble than what I was happy with, so I did end up going back and filling it just a hair more to eliminate as much of that air pocket as possible. I cleaned my top off really well and then popped that little silicone stopper down into the opening. I was sort of skeptical with the stopper rather than using a piece of tape or something to cover up that hole and then covering that with epoxy. But I did go back and try to remove this stopper a few times before I put epoxy on the bottom, and I will say it is pretty stuck in there. I don't see the stopper ever falling out as long as your customers, of course, follow the directions as far as don't leave it in a hot car, don't put it in the dishwasher, and don't let it sit in water in the sink. So I was really happy with it, but of course it is a smaller space. So even if you don't want to use the silicone stopper that comes with this tumbler, it would be much easier to cover that up with a small piece of vinyl and then epoxy the entire bottom or put some very shallow rhinestones in here. It is a shallow spot, so the silicone stopper cannot be covered. But to make sure that my epoxy was nice and adhered to the bottom of the tumbler and never pops off, I did take some 320 grit sandpaper, sand around that stopper just in the center, and used some PDB Creative Studio UV resin mixed with our same micas and glitters that we used in the center solution, and cured that for 3 minutes with my UV lamp. I am not going to epoxy over the bottom of this tumbler, so I'm going to tape off the bottom and the top and just trim right along that lip that's at the top of the tumbler to make a nice clean line, and then I will use my Cami Page Boutique vinyl trimmer tool to create a perfect line around the bottom. Before we sand our tumbler, we need to first apply our stencils. I have a Creative Fabrica membership, so anytime I need decals or stencils for my tumblers, that is the first place that I go to search all of their millions of fonts and files to download for free so that I can use them on my projects. Creative Fabrica always has some pretty incredible deals going on, so even if you already have a Creative Fabrica subscription, make sure you do check down below, because on top of their already amazing prices for a monthly or annual subscription, sometimes they even have an upgrade option to where it saves you money on your current subscription. So after I downloaded our Clover files, I headed over to Design Space. And although Design Space does not have the capability to curve an image, so we can't lay these out on a curved surface and apply them directly to the tumbler. However, I can create a flat shape utilizing the slice tool and the shapes in Design Space. So I created a shape rectangle that was the exact height and width of the top portion of the tumbler. I created a second shape that was the width of the bottom of the tumbler and placed that at the bottom of the first shape. I used an additional shape to angle that on the sides from the top to where our bottom dimensions met. used the slice tool to cut off any of that excess, and then I used the contour to get that little bit of extra that I missed at those two bottom corners. Again, that does not mean that you can cut this and wrap it around your tapered tumbler. In order to do a tapered wrap, you do need to be able to warp your shape so that it wraps around perfectly, and you cannot do that just yet in Design Space. So after I had my shape, I imported my little clovers, and unfortunately this is one big file, so I did have to separate all my clovers so I can resize them in different sizes. To do that, I created a circle shape, hovered that over each individual clover, highlighted that area and selected slice, removed the excess, the duplicate, and we were left with our single clovers. Now we're going to be adding a 3.5 inch shape in the center, or decal in the center. So I wanted to create a large offset so my glitter will show through on the offset of our main image. So I've created yet another shape, circle, and made that 3.85 inches wide, and then resize my clovers and place them all around the surface just to get an idea of how many of these that I need, the sizing that I like, and I don't waste any of my vinyl. Once I had all of my clovers, I removed that background, moved my circle over to the side because we still need that for our offset. And then we're going to create an outline for all of our clovers. I sort of aligned them all in one group, highlighted the whole group, and then selected offset and did anywhere from a 0.035 to 0.055 offset. Once I had that, you can't slice unless the image is a whole. So I selected each individual clover, selected slice, and then removed the duplicate, and we were left with our outlines. Our main concern is getting that center circle cut as well as the solid clovers. So as soon as I finish my offsets, I'm going to grab my Paper Studio stencil vinyl that I got from Hobby Lobby and use that to cut out the stencils for our Peekaboo. I'm going to place on that center circle first, since that's where our main decal is going to be, and then I will just randomly place those clovers all around, just making sure that they're not too close together, because once again we do have an offset to go around the edges of them. Once all of my stencils are on, then I will go in with 220 or 320 grit sandpaper and sand all of that open area so our paint and our epoxy will have nice adhesion. When using a acrylic tumbler and having to put that on your turner, you want to make sure you're using something really soft to go down in the center so it doesn't scratch your tumbler. So I'm using one of these really soft foams from ARTISTRY Epoxy, and then we're going to protect our tumbler or our paint from going inside our tumbler by using the paint stopper from Cami Page Boutique. Y'all know the drill. It's either super windy, rainy, or dark whenever I'm spray painting. So here is all of the beautiful colors that we used to create this spray paint ombre. I do have a couple videos in which I show spray painting an ombre on a tumbler. I will try to find that and have that linked down below for y'all. In the past, I have used a hot glue gun to mark all of my stencils. So once I put my glitter on top, I can see where my stencils are and remove them without having to search. But I got to thinking I really hate using a hot glue gun, and it made me a little nervous putting that on top of the acrylic, just in case it was so hot it went through our stencils. So I grabbed some of my scrap vinyl because, I mean, let's be honest, we're lying to ourselves if we are saying that we're going to use it for anything at all. And this is a good use for it. So I cut little strips of that scrap vinyl and just sort of folding them over and made a little tab on top of all of my stencils. Once I had it all marked, I went in with my full glue from Southern Belle Glitter. I'm going to give this a nice even coat all over my tumbler. I was having a little bit of trouble with streaking just simply because this was an older makeup brush. I need to either clean it really good or just replace it. So at the end, I do go over like I do with my epoxy, just sort of dabbed it all over so that once I apply my glitter, you won't be able to see any of those brush strokes underneath, and it will be nice and smooth. A couple things that I love with using the full glue to apply my glitter to tumblers is because it dries immediately with your heat gun. You can tell when it's dry because it goes from white to clear. It has a super tackiness to it, and after you apply your glitter, you can go straight outside, spray seal it, and go directly into epoxy. So there's absolutely no wait time, aside from just drying that up yourself with the heat gun and waiting on your clear spray paint to dry before adding on your first epoxy layers. I popped my tumbler on my tumbler stand from Cami Page Boutique so I could take the seal off of all of these gorgeous PDB Creative Studio glitters. And the first glitter we are using is PURPLEXED. This is the purple out of the pack. I'm going to go heavy around that top rim, hold the tumbler at an angle, and allow that glitter to fall down into our blue section. Next, we're coming in with High Dive. This is a gorgeous blue mix. And for our second and third glitters, you go heavy around the center of where you want that second glitter to be. And then tilt your tumbler towards the table and towards the ceiling to allow that glitter to fall into your previous color and your next color section. Next, we have Trust Fund. We're going to repeat the same steps as what we did for our blue. Next and last but not least, we have SCOVILLE. And y'all, I love orange glitter mixes. This one tops the charts for all that I have from PDB Creative Studio. It is a beautiful orange, and if you don't get any of these colors, make sure that you have this one in your collection for the upcoming spring and summer. Once I finish going over with all of these glitters, I'm going to go back in with all of them just to blend a little bit better and make sure I have all areas covered. Now that we have all of our glitter ombreed very nicely, I'm going to take a sheet of printer paper. You can also use parchment paper and press this glitter down nice and flat. Knock off any excess. We're going to go straight into sealing this in a couple of times with Rust-Oleum Matte Clear Coat. We want to do that to make sure that our glitters stay put and don't move into each other so we can keep that really nice ombre. After our spray paint has dried, we're going to remove all of our stencils and our tape at the top and bottom of our tumbler. After all of the stencils were removed, I gave this a coat of the ARTISTRY 1:1 ratio fast set epoxy. Let that cure completely and then sanded the tumbler really well. Just keep in mind, if you do tape your tumbler off like I did, you'll want to replace that tape before adding your epoxy. And if you're using a fast set, you can immediately remove that tape after you have torched your epoxy. And then add your tape back on before you do any sanding so that you can avoid scratching up those parts of your tumbler. For our offsets, we're going to be using the TeckWrapcraft textured gold metallic vinyl as well as the green metallic bubble-free vinyl. I grabbed this image from Etsy, and the first thing that we're going to do is create a hairline offset for our image, and then we're going to flatten that. There's a lot of fine detail in this image itself, so I want to minimize the amount of cutting that my machine has to do. So I sized it to 3.5 inches, highlighted the image, created a 0.010 offset, highlighted both the image and the offset, and selected flatten. That put the black outline around our image. I selected it once again to create a 0.035 offset, and then I didn't show it just there, but I did go back and create an additional offset so we can layer our pretty green vinyl and our textured gold together. I used the print to cut feature to print and cut out the main image, and I used Buttercraft printable vinyl. I did just learn that TeckWrapcraft also has a new printable vinyl out, which I'm super excited to try. I have some on the way. I'm sure it will be equally as incredible as all of the other vinyls that they have. So since we are putting the textured vinyl as our top layer offset, I want to give a coat of epoxy over top of that before I add on the actual image. So we're going to place these offsets on first, along with our clover offsets. Give this a coat of epoxy, and then we will come back and add on our main image. Since we're only using the offset, I did take those extra clovers, put them to the side so that I can put them back on the sheet and use them for a different project. I gave this a coat of epoxy, allowed that to cure, and then we needed to add on our decal. I did end up sanding this tumbler just to knock down some little extra bumps that were on there before this decal. Since I did that, we cannot spray seal it with a clear spray paint once we put on our decal. So to seal this decal in and avoid any micro bubbles on top of it, I am just going to first brush it off with a dry makeup brush. You can use your hand or just blow it off, whatever, because it is like a paper texture. So when your machine cuts it, it does tend to leave almost like a paper dust on top, and you don't want to scrub that in whenever you paint on your glue. Then I use the ARTISTRY glitter glue and a makeup brush to put a very thin layer of glue on here, removed all of that extra vinyl and just weeded it out, dried that up with my heat gun on a low heat setting, and then we are going to place this by hand. This was actually my second attempt at putting this decal on. The first I did use transfer tape, and although I've used it before in the past, for whatever reason, I took all the stickiness that I could off of it, and the decal just sort of moved around on there, and then it damaged the decal once I tried to pull it away from the cup and reposition it. So I just decided to place them one by one on this go round. Once I had finished my decal, I really wanted to add another offset around the Peekaboo ring from our main decal. So I did cut a 0.045 offset of our original circle that we made a stencil for and placed that on as well. I taped off the top and the bottom of this tumbler once again and gave this 2 final coats of epoxy. This acrylic tumbler does also have a really nice flat acrylic lid. So what we're going to do is sand this, and you will see that this portion of the tutorial is really sped up. It took me exactly an hour. I recorded the entire process from start to finish to complete this lid. But we're going to sand the lid using some 220 grit sandpaper. Don't forget the sides if you are also going to put rhinestones around the edge of the lid as well. Since this lid is clear and the UV rays can reach both the top and the underside of the lid, we're going to be using UV resin. You can't do this if you're doing a solid surface because the UV light will not be able to get underneath your rhinestones if you're doing it on a solid surface. But in this case, we can flip over our UV light, place the lid on top, and allow it to cure from underneath. And again, our UV resin is from PDB Creative Studio, and we're using 24 karat mica just to add a little color to the resin so that if there are any teeny tiny gaps in between our rhinestones, it's all filled by that beautiful mica. Our rhinestone pen, our tray, and all of our rhinestones are all from PDB Creative Studio. We are using Treasure SS20, 16, 10, 6, and 4. You want to try to use as many of the SS20 and 16 stones as possible. I try to do groups of them just so that I can get through a bigger area at one time with the bigger stones and then go back in and kind of fill in with the smaller stones. Hopefully that makes sense, but at all costs, I try to avoid using those teeny tiny ones because once you use one, it feels like you're using multiple just to get it back to where you can use a larger stone. But I also always try to avoid leaving any gaps that are bigger than the SS4 rhinestone. If you can fit a rhinestone in there, then you don't need to leave the gap. I normally do not record my process from start to finish because rhinestone projects can be pretty lengthy. And again, this took me exactly like on the dot an hour to complete. So this portion of the tutorial is sped up ×4. Very many of you have showed interest in my rhinestone tumblers and projects in the past, and just really indecisive on what to get, where to start. This is a really good place to start, not only to practice, but to test your skills and your patience on really getting those rhinestones close together and taking your time so that you have a quality product. It also only uses one color of rhinestones. I know the last tutorial that I did with rhinestones, I used multiple colors and sizes, and it was a little confusing, I understand, for some of you that may have not used rhinestones in the past. So if you want to do a small project like this, go find a rhinestone that's available in each size. Grab SS20, 16, 10, 6, and 4. There's 5 different sizes. Grab one of each and then do something small such as a lid or a keychain or some sort of acrylic blank. If you grab some tools from Cami Page Boutique, check out their acrylic blank section as well. Their acrylics are just a hair thicker than your typical, which is really, really good for rhinestones because it makes the base a little bit more sturdy, so you have a less chance, even with the keys and whatever else that might be on the keychain, beating it up a little bit, it's still going to really hold those rhinestones really well. Now, I used a silicone tool to spread out this UV resin all over the lid. You don't have to work in a large section like this or the entire lid. You can do small spots and then just cure as you go. But since this is a UV resin, it's not going to set up until I put UV rays on it. So I can step away from this. I usually just cover it up with a box or something like that to protect from any sunlight that might be coming in my room. And I can come back to that at a later time. My cord wasn't quite long enough on my light to reach over to my table, but I am going to show you how I placed it on there to cure. I did 2 minutes with the rhinestones, of course, facing up and my UV light upside down. And then I flipped it over and cured the top for 2 minutes as well. The SS16 rhinestone is perfect for the edge of this lid, so we're going to work in small sections. Add a little bit of rhinestones for about 2 to 3 inches around the side. Cure that for about 30 seconds or enough to where our rhinestones are not moving. Then I'll keep going around till I get this complete, and then I will cure it for the full 2 to 3 minutes time. After you have finished the side and cured that completely, you want to wash your rhinestones so you can bring their shine back. You've touched them, you have used the pen to place them on the tumbler. They might have got some glue on them if you're using liquid fusion. So use some Dawn dish soap or some sort of dish detergent and a scrub brush to scrub that up and bring their beautiful shine back. This tumbler was finally complete, and man, I'm happy with the results. I'm not a huge fan with the small holidays like St. Patrick's Day, Valentine's Day, things like that, but I love this tumbler. We've got the cute decal on front, the rainbow for March, spring, and St. Patrick's Day. We have the clovers. It just all ties together so nice. PDB Creative Studio glitter packs are released on the Thursday of the second full week of every month. If you missed this glitter pack, they will all release individually March 1st at 12 p.m. MST time. I will have everything linked down below, including all of the colors, so you can easily find them on the website. All other materials I have used in this tutorial will be linked down in the description below with some coupon codes. And of course, if you have any additional questions, just drop them in the comments and I'll answer them as quickly as possible. That is all for today. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you next time.